everybody. As some of you who are in my Patreon know, I have been doing debriefs on some of my thoughts about the various podcasts that people are appearing on regarding NXIVM, et cetera, the people that are now able to talk, the people that are out of prison. And there are a few thoughts I've been having behind the Patreon paywall, and many, many thoughts that my patrons are having. And I thought it might be good to talk to my old friend Richard Grannon. He's not that old, but we've become friends for quite a while now. My old friend Richard Grannon, to understand certain sort of the psychological implications of some of the things that my patrons have been noticing. So this episode is going to be sort of in two parts. The one is the public part, and then I'm going to go to Patreon and address some of the questions that my patrons have for Mr. Grannon. Mr. Grannon, you are quite popular with my people, so to speak.
Oh.
Just so you know. All right. So let me set this up for you, Richard, because I know you don't know much about what's going on here. So there are all these podcasts I mentioned. And there seems to be a range, certainly based on what my patrons are saying, there seems to be a range of different personalities at play. On the one extreme, you have people that really seem to understand what happened, seem to feel a sense of culpability, and have a deep sense of remorse. And then on the other extreme, you have people that don't seem to understand what happened, don't seem to feel very responsible for anything. In fact, think that maybe in their corner of their world, nothing bad happened. So we'll get to more specifics when we get to the questions that came in for you. But I had a few questions I wanted to ask you. These are general, and I know you don't know the people involved. Actually, do you mind sharing with people how far you got into the vow and why you stopped? Do you mind sharing that?
Oh, not very far at all. I was listening to, I was watching, but I'm an auditory processor, so I was hearing Bonnie trying to convince Mark that maybe what they were in wasn't a wonderful group of self-development, but might be something more sinister. And then I listened to Mark start to justify what was happening and say, "Oh, don't be negative, or just give it a minute. Let's just think about this first." And it made me want to throw up, so I stopped watching. I couldn't take it. I just couldn't take it. It was too much for me.
I understand. You sensitive soul. Yeah, I remember when you told me that, I said, well, basically bad shit happened. And you were like, yeah, I figured bad shit was going to happen. That's why I couldn't handle it, Isn't that interesting? Like I have an issue with watching TV shows where somebody's lying and they're going to get found out. I get so uncomfortable. I cannot watch. There's something about watching somebody lie. I just hate it.
There's a good film, but it's very painful to watch, that Adam Sandler made and starred in, called Uncut Gems. And he's a degenerate gambler and a pathological liar. And it's a very nerve-wracking 90 minutes. Very, very nerve-wracking, watching him lie himself in and out of situations. It's hard to watch.
Yeah. I would hate it. All right, well, let me get into it. So one of the questions that a number of people, there's a lot of people, I'm going to say this to the public, there's a lot of people behind the scenes that are discussing things. A lot of people ex-NXIVM that are chatting. And some questions have come up, and Richard, who is always there to jump on with me and answer the questions, I thought it'd be good to ask him these questions. So the first one is like, cluster Bs, okay? Do they really not know what they did? Like, the reason I ask is because you and I know narcissists who say, yes, we know what we're doing. So, like, do they really not know what they're doing?
I don't see any reason to believe that they don't know what they're doing. I've never been presented with evidence that suggests that they're not perfectly aware of what they're doing, which is why there's always, I mean, certainly for the last 25 years, there's been a body of clinicians, of which I am not one, but people with PhDs and who are licensed clinicians saying this isn't a personality disorder. Being a bad person isn't a mental health issue. This is just outright evil, which is a controversial take, but it's not merely a minority of fringe clinicians. It's a growing noise that's coming out. So no, I work from the premise that they do know exactly what they're doing.
So I was thinking about Dr. Peter Salerno, because as you probably know, he doesn't believe it's sort of like shame based. They're hiding shame and stuff like that, or that they do know, and that they're predatory. Actually, I don't know if he says they do know, but he says basically they're predatory. And then Dr. Karen Mitchell says you have predators and non-predators. It's like really that simple. But the reason I keep asking is because sometimes the way people present, they seem to have no knowledge of what they've done.
As I understand, I think when I've watched Dr. Peter Salerno talk about it, I think he's saying that they do know what they're doing. And with Karen Mitchell, is she saying there are non-predators in the cluster B?
No.
Spectrum.
She's just saying it's much simpler. It's much simpler than like, they're trauma, childhood.
Yeah.
Like there's predators and there's no predator, That's her sort of delineation.
I think I prefer that delineation. I know what Dr. Pete Salerno is saying. It's almost like a retroactive post hoc construction that comes from psychotherapeutic ideology that says, this is a deeply shame-based personality disorder. I think technically it probably is, but he would be right to the extent that it really doesn't matter. It's really nobody's business. That's between the client and the therapist. That would be between the person with the personality disorder and their therapist if they ever chose to go to therapy, which they wouldn't. But I think he's pushing back against there's ideology has crept in psychotherapy, and ideology has grown within psychotherapy that we're all just innocent children doing the best that we can. And voices like his are a pushback against that, going, no, some of these people are actually just engaged in evil, and it's nothing to do with shame, and they're not victims. I disagree. I think it is trauma based, but I agree with him in principle that it's like, so what? Who cares? Whose business is it? But back to your original question, I've never seen any compelling evidence that they don't know exactly what they're doing. Now, to just add a little bit of nuance to that, I also think they're highly dissociative, and we're going to be talking about dissociation today. And I know that they're highly delusional. So when I say they know that they're doing acts of evil, they know that they're lying, they know that they're upsetting people, they know that they're using people, exploiting them, but it's still within the parameters of a perspective on reality that is fundamentally delusional. And I say it's delusional because we know from Kernberg that they have a core false self, and they continuously fail the reality test. They can't get to grips with reality as it is per se, but that doesn't mean that they don't know perfectly well what they're doing to other people, if that made sense.
Then what about a cluster B personality that has the awareness that they have a false self? It's so interesting to me that having the awareness that they have a false self, and they know what they're doing, and they behave as though there's no choice.
Well, I think that's just a normal human function. Slavoj Žižek refers to this in the Lacanian tradition. Sorry, it's a little bit complicated. He calls this the fetishist split, where you know and you do not know. We all know perfectly well that we are, biological. We might be an eternal soul, but we're attached to a dying animal. But we don't think about it all the time, because if you did, you go nuts. So we all know and don't know. There's different levels of knowing in perfectly healthy human beings. There's splitting in perfectly healthy human beings. So if you sit me down, I'm a narcissist, and you say, you have a false self. And I'll go, yeah, I know I have a false self. But then there's another part of me that's going, and that false self is the correct one. And I'm still better than you, and I still have a right to hurt you because you're less than me. You don't matter, and I do. Do you know that you have a false self? I slide into my adult ego state, or in transactional analysis, they call it the little professor, and I want to be clever. So I go, yeah, I know perfectly well that I have a grandiose false self. And yet the other part of me that's directing everything says, and it's the correct one.
Yes, that actually weirdly makes sense. And then I was thinking, though, as well, I'm taking a tangent suddenly.
Sure.
You know, that false self, the person that has so much confidence, I don't know, Alexander the Great. Was there a false self there that enabled him to do the supposedly miraculous, the remarkable? So there's this fine line between like delusion and a belief in self that seems almost supernatural. Am I getting too weird?
No, but you're broadening out the subject into narcissism, cults, religion, spirituality, and how humans process reality. In the case of Alexander the Great, if I do my old psychoanalysis and as engineering switcheroo, which I like to do, I would say, okay, that engine, what's the environment that's operating in? If everybody is telling him he's a god on earth and he's the chosen one, and well, not everyone, but the most significant authority figures in his environment were presumably encouraging this. I don't think somebody just magically becomes a general at age 13. I imagine he was placed there, and the people who placed him there would have said, you are a god, as it would have been with Egyptian rulers, or, I mean, for some English kings, they believed that they had a special mandate from God, but by virtue of the fact that they had power. That was the proof of your power. It was a proof of God's will. Just to add texture to that, that's why there was such a thing as trial by combat up until, God, it's like the 15th century. If God, so you just hit each other with swords, and whoever dies was not favored by God. How do we know? Because he's fucking dead. And you're like, you know, it's mind-boggling to us, but in that time, I don't think narcissistic personality disorder would have been as identifiable as it is today, because we have concepts like narcissism and ADHD and blah, because we have an idea of a sane person. They didn't have any such thing as a sane. They didn't have that myth. That's our cultural myth, is that there's something called a normal person out there who doesn't have weird impulses and warped perceptions and childhood issues, and which is, you could argue, is just as false as telling Alexander the Great he was ordained by God to build empires, or, you know, whatever. So that's why I went like that, is because I was like, you've not gone off track, but you've opened it up to, like, we've got to get into the philosophy, history, anthropology if you go down that road.
And I may have also given fuel to cult leaders like, well, this is the rationale behind it all. There really is no such thing as a sane person. It's all relativistic.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure there's cults out there that probably have used. Well, don't most, actually, this is a good question. I think if you think about it, most cults would have the idea of an ideal human. I know that Scientology does, because you have all the thetans removed from your aura, and then you are awake or a light. What do they call it?
Clear. You're clear.
You're clear. So they have it. So there will be, what's the utopia we're all pushing towards? Is it heaven? Is it Sartori? Is it Jannah? Is it, you know, that's a recurrent theme. It's just in the modern age, it's the idea of, the sane person. What's your reward? You get to be sane. Thanks, modernity. That's a bit shit, but that's what we inherited.
And actually, I was thinking about, like, one of the things they talk about in many cults is like that the ideal human would be considered by mainstream to be insane, which I think is a very interesting little twist, which actually might also be true, because this culture currently, and maybe it has been for a long time, is very insane. Anyway, that was too much of a digression. Let me get back to my other question.
Sure.
Okay, and this relates to, I think this is going to relate to dissociation. So there's the cluster Bs that absolutely know what they're doing. So then my question is there another category that is clueless? They don't really get it. Because, and I want to be very careful, I look at certain people who have been indicted, for example, in various different groups. They might use the right words that they are aware now, but they don't seem to get it. And some people, for instance, in my Patreon say things like, well, it seems to be like cognitive performative empathy. You know, they're out of prison, but it seems cognitive, it seems performative. Like, so the question is there a kind of cluelessness in this spectrum as well?
Not by my dogma. Not by my dogma. No, I think if there's no intentionality, and there's no premeditation, I wouldn't call that person. I wouldn't say that person's in the cluster B. They're probably just an idiot. Like if somebody's doing bad things consistently and they genuinely don't know that they're bad, they probably have something wrong with them. But I wouldn't be saying they're in the cluster B spectrum of personality disorders.
Okay. Got it. So they're outside of that, because there are, in many different cults, there are people that do things that are bad, that were led to believe that those things were good. But here's the interesting thing. I think a person that has a full range of empathy or conscience tends to get pretty horrified when they realize that that's happened.
Mm-hmm.
And in the case of one of the people that has been talking on podcasts, they have that recognition. But then I'm also seeing that there are, in the spectrum, there are people that let's say that they're not bad people. They've done bad shit, but they just seem to be completely unaware of it. And so I know you mentioned, well, maybe they're an idiot. But I'm wondering what is that? Is that dissociation? Is that an excuse?
Could be a game. Are you saying that they know they've done bad things, but they don't seem to show authentic remorse or horror for what they've done?
That's been reported, yeah.
So for me, this is Richard Grannon's dogma. It's not. Take it for what it's worth, folks. I need to see entitlement and exploitation, and I need to see a sense that the person believes they have the right to treat others badly. Now, if Sarah has treated 100 people badly, and I say, Sarah, this is what you did to them, and they're now damaged for life, and Sarah goes, oh no, oh, I can't believe I did that. Oh my God, that's terrible. But you're just not feeling any genuine regret or remorse. I would say, no, it's very simple. She's in the cluster B. She's in the cluster. She feels as though she had the right to do that, or as though it's not her fault. It happened. Yes, I robbed them, but also sometimes it just rains. You know, it's the core of narcissism for me. Richard's dogma is denial and the movement away of accountability, responsibility, and blame from me to you. It's your fault. It's your fault. Whatever I do to you, if I beat you halfway to death, you know, maybe I shouldn't have done that, but ultimately you shouldn't have provoked me. And that's how I live. And that's what I live with. That's the doctrine I live with. So if I knew someone had done really bad things but didn't see genuine remorse from them, I would say that's entitlement. It's entitlement, and it's the dissociation from genuine, authentic moral responsibility.
That is interesting. One quick thing. When Richard said Sarah, he did not mean Sarah Edmondson. He just pulled the name out of his bum. It was just an example.
Is one of the girls is called Sarah?
Well, Sarah was my business partner in NXIVM, and she was the one that told me she got branded, and that's what started the whole, you know.
So Richard
debacle.
Grannon followers, you can say in the comments, Richard always chooses Sarah. It's either Sarah or Barbara. And I'm sorry to all Sarahs and all Barbaras. That was I just accidentally stood on that landmine.
You've just done it again, because there was a Barbara in this whole thing as well.
Fuck. I need some. Mary. Okay, it was Mary.
There was. I don't think there was a Mary. There may have been. Somebody's gonna text me afterwards saying there was a Mary. How can you forget? She was your best friend. Let's just say that things have faded a bit, you know, in my cult memory.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's interesting what you're saying. So, yes, because I was going to say to you that there's another category on the other extreme that's in complete denial of their actions. Maybe they were indicted. Maybe they went to prison. But they don't think they did anything wrong. And that's what my patrons have said, and you know, it's sort of this weird Delulu kind of existence. That here's an example, for instance. This may not be an example, but something else somebody pointed out to me, that there are people that say, oh, you know, these terrible things happen, and they start crying, but then it's pointed out they're not crying about the terrible things that happen to other people. They're crying for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
They're feeling bad for themselves, and there's no indication of feeling bad for anybody else because they did nothing wrong. After potentially having been indicted, after potentially, you know, been in prison. And that to me is so interesting, because that's a level of denial that is puzzling to me.
That's classic cluster B. We can start with your primary building block of cluster B, self-pitying psychopath. Self-pitying psychopath. So these people, if they're indicted, they've broken the law, and they must have done it consistently.
Some may have, yeah.
Okay. So when we're looking for psychopaths, I think, because the archetype of a psychopath that we have was built in America, and it's based on the American penal system. So if people say to me, oh, is this person a psychopath? The first question I ask, because I'm a dumbo, I'm not academic intellect, I'll say, well, have they broken the law? It's a law breaking. Before you get to boundary breaking and breaking of moral codes or philosophical codes, there's just straight up law breaking. So if the person has broken the law and they've been caught, not everybody who breaks the law is a psychopath, but a psychopathic person will be a law breaker. And that comes from entitlement. The rules don't apply to me. They apply to other people. They don't apply to me. And that's just masked over very, very commonly. We can go back to Cleckley. He noticed this in 1950 when he wrote.
Wait, who's Cleckley?
He wrote one of the most important books on psychopathy that I can't remember the name of right now. And he's an American researcher. He was working in these the American penal system and in the psychiatric units. And our vision today of what, you know, clinically a psychopath is considered broadly comes from Cleckley. And he would say, yeah, psychopaths are very sentimental when it comes to them or their pet things. So there's a hyper sentimentalized side to the psychopath. And that's very normal. It's also very normal for them to be very self-pitying.
I did not know that.
You look like a golden retriever who heard two strange sounds at the same time.
I did. I was like, I did not know that, because I think I've been seeing, it's true, because I think I've been thinking about this concept of psychopathy, you know, being like born with some kind of brain abnormality and having like no anxiety. So I didn't think that they had sentimentality, but you're saying, well, according to some of the research, yes, they do.
Oh yeah, it's very well known. It's not, for some reason it passed out of fashion to talk about it. But any clinician, I mean, you've interviewed people who are experts on psychopathy. If you ask them, are they known to be sentimental and self-pitying? They'll go, yeah, 100%.
I never fucking asked that question, did I?
Most people don't. So I did a little Instagram reel about it, and it got like thousands of views and tons of likes, and people like, oh, I didn't know that. I first heard about it before I even took a psychology degree. I was watching The Sopranos, and when the Duchess of Malfi, well, I can't remember the character's name, his psychiatrist is working with him, she goes through the textbook for the classic definitions of a psychopath, and she has this horrifying realization that the other psychiatrists were warning her, Tony Soprano is a classic psychopath. And she said, no, he's okay, we're working through. And then she reads it, and she reads it out, highly sentimental, particularly with children and animals. So they hyper sentimentalize objects that they see as innocent, that they perceive as being pure and innocent. And that's when she has the realization. And then I go to university, and, you know, we did a little module on psychopathy, nothing on narcissism. So yeah, it's a known thing for them to be hyper sentimental.
Okay, this is interesting, because I've been thinking, for instance, you know, if somebody loves dogs, they're okay.
No,
and
yeah,
you're saying, oh no, they can be fixated on dogs.
They could. I mean, I had a girlfriend like that. She hated people. She was an ultra racist, harboring desires of genocide. She's from the Balkans, so she's white and wanting to kill other white people, but she believes them to be of an inferior race. She wants to kill men, women, and children if they're from, let's not name the countries. You guys can, about the Yugoslavian wars, but animals. I mean, my God, there's nothing she wouldn't do for an animal in need. Just not a human animal. Just not a human animal if it was from Croatia.
Yeah. So I love that white on white racism. What a fucked up thing.
It's heavy.
That's
just one other little point there. People use the word sociopath a lot, and everybody here on Mark's channel, I want you to be smart and sound smart when you're talking about this. Don't use the word sociopath. It's out of date. You can say antisocial personality disorder or psychopath. And the reason it was considered outmoded and out of date is because it was overused throughout the 80s and early 90s in TV and in books, and people's perspective of what a sociopath just got so warped. And then the delineation between psychopath and sociopath got warped. But the same thing has happened with psychopathy. So how in our culture could you not think Hannibal Lecter and Patrick Bateman are the role models for what a psychopath is? And yet, in reality, let me make another movie reference. There's a movie called Heat with Robert De Niro, where Al Pacino catches him and says, what are you going to do? And he says, I'm a highly organized guy. Do you see me holding up liquor stores with Born to Lose on my chest? And he goes, no. And he says, so I'm a professional. The psychopath in that scene is not the highly organized, the common psychopath in that scene is not the highly organized Robert De Niro, who can leave anywhere within 30 seconds. So as soon as he feels the heat around the corner, it's the guy with the Born to Lose tattoo. That's your psychopath. It's a much messier type. We should be thinking about somebody who really can't get their shit together. They're very low in impulse control. They're very self-pitying. And yes, they're commonly ask anybody who's worked in drug rehab clinics, the amount of sentimentality you get. I've worked with criminals who are drug users. From criminals who are drug users, it's coming out the walls. Self-pity and sentimentality. Not that these people haven't suffered and they don't deserve help. It's just I'm just saying for the people watching, so they can be smarter than the average person on this subject. That's really what we're talking about with psychopathy.
I think ASPD sounds so like, what the hell is that? And I think sociopath sounds so sexy. Maybe that's why people still stick to it, right?
Yeah.
Also, when I said ASPD to somebody, they said, "What is that? Antisocial personality disorder?" They're like, "Oh, they don't like being around people." I go, "No, that's not it.
Thank you, psychology. Thank you for giving something a really confusing title again.
And boring, so boring.
Boring.
Just to go back to the delineation, because I'm aware that sociopathy is not a clinical term, but I have heard people say that psychopaths are born, sociopaths are made.
Don't say that, kids. Don't say it. Should I tell you why?
Go in, get it.
Right. So there used to be a thing when I studied psychology. You go, psychology, year one, here's your psychology textbook. The nature-nurture debate. Does mental health issues come from your genes? Or do they come from the environment and from trauma? And then there was the Genome Project, and then we learned about epigenetics, and we know now that it's neither and both. There's no such thing as any disorder that's purely genetic. There's no such thing as any disorder that's purely trauma-based. It doesn't make sense. We are complicated creatures, and in the age of epigenetics, we understand that the environmental pressures cause the change of expression of genes. So they're rooted within each other. And then the genetic expression changes the environment, which changes the genes, which changes the environment. So you have this Ouroboros snake eating its own tail kind of a situation. So again, to sound smart, we don't say born or made because it's both and neither. And we use a psychosocial-biological model. That's the mainstream consensus. So again, if people want to sound smart, these are the things they need to be sticking to.
What is that model? Can you just explain that model just very briefly?
Yeah, it's basically what I just said, which is it's partly your biology, it's partly your latent characteristics, the traits that you have, and then it's partly, so you've got the psyche, the social, and the biology, psychosocial, biological, things that happen in your environment, things that traumatize you, things that you learn or patterns of behavior you could get into growing up, or the culture that you're raised in. It's all of these things. That's the consensus. That's the consensus view.
You know, I posted something the other day that I think you reposted, the whole carousel about trauma doesn't cause cruelty, which is echoed by, you know, Peter Salerno, Karen Mitchell, Dr. Ramani, yourself. I think that's one of the other things that as people have been listening to these various podcasts, I think that they feel they sort of get really focused on the traumatic events that happen in somebody's life. And then when I point this out, I go, well, there's a lot of people that have had trauma that are like really wonderful human beings. It sort of shocks them for a moment, you know. I just want to get your thoughts on the trauma doesn't cause cruelty.
So there's a thing that I'm enjoying saying to people these days, because like yourself, I like to provoke people sometimes too. Something has crept into our culture at the ideological level, and that is psychotherapy. The world has become more psychologized. So everybody thinks it's their job to be a psychotherapist. It isn't. It's actually, if you look, it's gotten into politics, it's gotten into our philosophy, it's gotten into our way of doing life. It is not your job to act like a psychotherapist for anyone in your life. No one. It certainly isn't your job to look at like a dictator of a foreign country, to look at Saddam Hussein or his sons and be like, I wonder, just for me, I just wonder what he would fit. No, see, don't do that. That's really perverse. Don't fucking do that. It's not your job. And I think we're sick with it. We're infected with this virus that slows everything down because we're trying to be everybody else's psychotherapist, and you really mustn't. You really mustn't. Not even your own children. You're not a psychotherapist. And if you are, no psychotherapist who's got their head screwed on would be like, oh, I can be a psychotherapist to my husband or my children or my wife. It doesn't work like that. If people need a psychotherapist, they should go and pay and get one. It's not our job to figure out why people do what they do and get into their childhood trauma. I mean, psychopaths love all that. People in the cluster B spectrum think it's wonderful that conscientious people of good nature are, you know, wringing their hands. Why did they and should we? And fuck that. What did they do? Look at their behavior. Okay, finished. Halas. You can make your judgment off the behavior. Don't get into another person's intent. It's a real boundary breaking thing to do, and it's not mentally healthy.
It gets me thinking about what Godside calls suicidal empathy. You know, this thing of so focused on what caused them to do that. I was thinking about, I saw recently an interview where two women interviewed this terrorist who basically talked about raping women and children and killing people and doing horrible, horrible things. And I was thinking to myself, it's sort of like if they suddenly got focused on what caused him to be that way, as opposed to the hundreds of people that he murdered or raped. And I'm so interested in what it is that causes people to get so focused on feeling sorry for a perpetrator. Like, do you have a sense of what that is?
Yes, I do. I think the theme of the chat today is trauma responses and dissociation and control. So one way of handling really awful events, and this is something psychotherapists, I think it's not strictly the Freudian, Lacanian psychoanalytic school. I think it's a bad blend. And I think it started happening in the 70s. You had psychotherapy, and then you had the New Age movement revival, and a rekindled interest in psychedelics, and a rekindled interest in Buddhism and Hinduism, and then non-duality, and people were channeling. And I think it became this melange of, I've mentioned this to you before. You remember the Sounds True books, audio books from the 80s? And they'd bong a bell, and then a woman would go, Sounds True presents Eckhart Tolle. When I do a poo-poo, it doesn't even smell. And you get this whole act of like, to be enlightened, to be in touch with human suffering, and also to understand and a lot of this was actually good stuff. I mean, I used to love listening to Louise L. Hay growing up. And looking back on it now, some of it is just crazy. But she would say things like, we are all just victims of victims. And I think it's like the non-dualistic stuff. At some level, you're right. But there are levels to this. What's your belt? If you're recovering and you've just come out of it, you're a white belt. If you've made some progress in your recovery, you're a yellow belt, and so on and so on. Then you're a black belt. Once you get into the black belt levels and you're emotionally regulated and your perceptions aren't warped by the fact that you're still in pain and the pain lives inside of you and you're haunted by ghosts, we can talk about you are me and I am you and we are one. When we're not there, we shouldn't be talking about that. It's not, it then becomes another theme for the day, role play. So a lot of people are pretending they're that, because it protects them, it protects their ego, it makes them feel good. It's a way of signaling to other people that they have this wonderful thing called empathy. I'm just so compassionate, as though that in and of itself, without discernment and without wisdom, is some amazing thing to have. And it really isn't, which is why you have a concept that's growing in popularity, like suicidal empathy, because people like Gad Saad are looking around and going, what are we doing right now? What is this? And I think it was born of a convergence of ideas and concepts and ideologies, and it was with good intentions. A lot of these things are with good intentions, but what it produced was a crap way of doing life that feels good, but it's not effective. Just to finish that minor rant off, if I find a terrorist, I find a killer, I can sit with him and I can hold space and I see the child in him. Okay, that comforts me. I don't want to think about what he was doing to other people and them screaming and begging for mercy while he laughed sadistically. So I dissociate from all that and I take us both into the womb of spirituality and we become souls in the stuff. That's for my protection. It's also ego aggrandizing, because people can watch this performance and go, my God, how he's so spiritual. He's not even remotely angry. Oh, he's such an amazing man, which I am, and so spiritual too, ultra spiritual. You met that guy, didn't you? The ultra spiritual guy. Didn't you work with him? Right?
Yeah, totally.
JP. Yeah. I love his stuff. But when it comes to satirizing that sort of performative, narcissistic, self-aggrandizing, faux pseudo spirituality, he nailed it. I mean, he created his own niche really for that. But that's what's happening there. I believe I haven't seen the interview you're talking about. I don't know who it was, but why is he getting a platform and his victims aren't?
Yeah, and I don't think they weren't doing that. I just was imagining if they would. You've actually really helped me get it, because I was feeling that this desire to try to have empathy for somebody that's done terrible things.
Yeah.
Feels self-indulgent. I couldn't quite put my finger on it. But when you talked about dissociation, I realized, right, I don't like this feeling of pain and the places I'll have to go to. So I'm going to make this about my own empathy and caring. And I'm sort of going to cut off from the pain of the victim, because I don't want to feel that pain for myself. So really it's just about myself.
Absolutely. It's 100% what's happening.
Yeah.
So what I just took a very self-indulgent 8 minutes rambling over, you summed up in about 20 seconds, but that's it. You got it. That's it.
Yeah. I hadn't quite seen the dissociation part. Okay. So, to all my regular podcast viewers and listeners, thank you so much for listening to this portion. And as always, I will say to you, please, for the love of everything, stay curious. For my Patreon members, we're now going to continue as I ask Mr. Grannon some of your questions. Stand by. All right, here we go.